Hi, my name is David Summers. I'm 34 years old, and I'm from a small town called Silver Ridge in Kansas. I'm about to tell you a story that changed my life in a way that words, no matter how hard I try, will never fully capture. It all started with a regular workday, a pain in my neck, and a trip to the hospital that ended up taking me to a place I never could have imagined existed. It was a strange kind of beautiful. When I got to the hospital, everything around me had a softness I couldn't explain. The walls seemed warmer, the lights less harsh. People were rushing around, but I felt this overwhelming calm. And when they asked what was wrong, all I could say was, "I don't want to leave." They didn't understand. How could they? I didn't understand it myself, but something in me knew. This wasn't just a hospital visit, it was a transition. I had stepped out of my body and I wasn't afraid. I felt like I had come home, but then they pulled me back. And when I came back, I wasn't the same, not even close. Let me tell you the whole story. My name's David Summers. I'm from a small town called Silver Ridge, out in rural Kansas. My dad was a trucker, ran his own rig, mostly hauled steel, and my brother and I, we were practically raised under that trailer, grew up changing tires and checking brakes before we even hit our teens. By 13, I was driving. By 15, I was hauling loads, 80,000 pounds, no joke. While other kids were out playing or chasing girls, I was working. We were men before we ever got to be boys. We didn't know any different. Work was life. Work was pride. I remember cold mornings, standing outside the shop, my breath fogging up the air as I waited for Dad to fire up the engine. The smell of diesel still brings me back. That low rumble of the engine meant another day of purpose, of grit, and we loved it, even when we were too tired to say it. School came and went. I was too young to drive commercially, so I joined the Army at 19. Did my time overseas, Germany, Korea. Learned discipline, learned how to push past exhaustion. But I always missed home. Always missed the hum of diesel and the feel of the road. After 6 years, I got out. Honorable discharge, went right back to working with heavy equipment. Bulldozers, cranes, wind turbines, you name it. Something about that raw power, that machinery, I loved it, still do. It was during a job out in Pratt, Kansas, working on one of those massive wind farms, that everything changed. It was a Saturday. I remember because we were supposed to get off early. I'd just eaten a sandwich I'd packed the night before. Bologna, butter and ice. Something quick. I'd gone back to work when I felt it. Pressure. In my neck. Heavy, pulsing. At first, I thought maybe I'd slept funny, but it didn't go away, it got worse. I stopped working, climbed down from the truck, tried to walk it off, but the pain crept in deeper, more urgent. I went to the water truck driver and asked him to take me to the local clinic. When I got there, I told the nurse I needed Tums. Why? Because this had happened before. A year earlier in North Dakota. I'd been on the phone with my girlfriend when it hit like a horse kicked me in the neck. My heart was pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. Turned out it was a heart attack. So here I was again. Same pain, same pressure. I figured I knew what was happening. I told the nurse, "Just give me some Tums and aspirin." She gave me the meds and let me sit down. And then my arms started to ache. That's when I knew this wasn't going to fade away. This was serious. Everything after that moved in slow motion. I remember leaning back in the chair. The security guard was just a few feet away. I thought, I hope he catches me before I hit the floor. And then, black, but not empty. I was in the stars, no body, no weight, just awareness surrounded by galaxies. It felt like I'd fallen upward. And then something strange, a giant cavern, like a cave, but the walls didn't go down. They peeled away and opened into space. There was no floor. Where the ground should have been, there was sky and a path. Floating beneath me, made of square stones laid end to end. To my right, the path curved and vanished. To the left, it led straight to a wall with a tall arched door. And in that doorway, someone, a figure, translucent, watching me. I wasn't afraid, curious, sure, but fear, gone. I was pulled toward that door, fast as a bullet. The wind screamed past me. I moved like no human could. When I reached the wall, I remembered why I came, to see who was there. But the figure floated away, drifting down the path until it disappeared. Then darkness, pitch black. Couldn't see my hand in front of my face, and just when I started to wonder if this was it, a light, not just a glow, but a beam, searching, scanning. And then it found me. The light wasn't blinding, it was penetrating. It felt like it saw through me, but not in a way that made me feel exposed. It was like it knew me, every thought, every scar, every mistake. And it loved me anyway. The warmth wrapped around me not like fire, but like memory, like home. As I was pulled into it, I didn't resist. The brightness swallowed the darkness and I was inside it. But it wasn't just light, it was alive, conscious. And it began to show me things, not like a slideshow, but more like knowing, direct, immediate and clear. No questions needed, no words spoken, just truth. I saw moments from my life, not the big ones, not the loud ones, the small ones. The time I helped an old man load groceries without being asked. The moment I forgave someone who didn't know they'd hurt me. Things I'd forgotten. But they mattered here, more than I ever knew. They were shining. Then I felt it. A presence, immense, endless, but close. Like it was right behind me and inside me at once. I didn't see a face, but I felt the love, a kind of love that didn't need conditions or reasons, the kind that doesn't exist down here, not fully. And it said, without words, "You are not alone." I wanted to stay. Every part of me did. That light, that love, it made Earth feel like a pale shadow. I had no worries there, no guilt, no questions. I didn't care about money, reputation, or regrets. I was whole. And I didn't miss the body I left behind. But something shifted. It was like the light opened further, and I began to see beyond it. A horizon, blue sky, trees that shimmered as if lit from within, flowers the size of dinner plates, glowing softly. A garden, but not like anything I'd ever seen. It pulsed with life. Every petal, every leaf seemed to sing. I floated toward it, barely aware I was moving. It felt like the place had a heartbeat, and mine was sinking with it. I passed over a slope, like a cliffside that dropped gently into the garden. The trees had branches shaped like spirals, and I could see hooks on each one, fine golden hooks that held nothing, but seemed sacred. Below me, the ground sparkled, not with diamonds, but with something purer, like truth made visible. The air hummed, not loud, but deeply. A tone that felt like it came from the core of everything. And then I heard laughter, familiar. My mother's voice, even though she'd passed years before. She didn't speak, but I felt her joy. I looked for her, but I couldn't see faces, just shapes, energy, light in motion. They weren't ghosts. They were more real than anything I've ever seen. Their presence made mine feel weightless. There was no separation, no loneliness, only connection. And then I felt others, friends, ancestors, maybe even people I hadn't met yet, all known to me there. And just as I reached the edge, just as I thought I was about to step into that place fully, I heard another voice. This one was softer, but more direct. A voice that didn't ask, it told. It's not your time. Not angry, not cruel, just matter of fact. And in that moment, something inside me cracked. I wanted to argue. I wanted to plead. Why send me back? Back to pain, to noise, to struggle? But the voice had already decided. And in a blink, the light around me folded in on itself. The garden dimmed. The air thickened. The feeling of perfect peace faded like a dream at dawn. And suddenly, I was falling. Not physically, but spiritually. Back through clouds of memory, through layers of self I didn't know existed. I felt myself shrinking, becoming small again, heavy, human. I could hear machines, beeping, voices, someone calling my name, then pressure, cold, pain, and breath. My chest rose sharply. I was back in the hospital, eyes blinking open, lights glaring overhead, hands on my shoulders, a nurse's voice loud and sharp. "He's back! He's back!" And I was, but I wasn't. Because something had changed, something fundamental. I couldn't explain it yet, but I knew. I'd been somewhere real. I stayed in that hospital for days. They monitored my heart, ran tests, gave me pills, but none of that mattered to me. Not really. I kept staring at the ceiling, wondering how to tell anyone what I'd seen. How could I describe the hooks on the trees, the voices without mouths, the love that had no limits? People visited, family, friends. They were kind, but they didn't understand. How could they? I could barely understand it myself. They talked about recovery, about coming home, about slowing down, and I nodded, smiled, pretended to agree. But inside, I was somewhere else, still floating, still hearing the hum. The hardest part wasn't the pain, it was the distance. I'd been to a place where time didn't exist, where love was a force, not a feeling, and now I was back in a world where everything hurt, everything faded, and everyone seemed asleep. I watched people rush past my hospital room, their eyes fixed on screens, on charts, on clocks, and I thought, if only they knew. I tried telling one of the nurses. I said, I was gone, and I saw something. She smiled politely, like I'd told her a dream. But it wasn't a dream. I'd had dreams. This wasn't like that. This was more real than this room, more real than the heartbeat monitor beside me. I could still feel it, echoing beneath my skin. The doctors called it a cardiac event, said I was lucky. That word, lucky, made me flinch. I didn't feel lucky, I felt torn, like someone had handed me a glimpse of heaven and then slammed the door shut. I didn't tell my father, didn't know how. He was a hard man, raised on steel and silence. He wouldn't have understood, or worse, he would have pretended to. Days passed. I got stronger, physically, but inside, something stayed open, like a door that wouldn't close. I started hearing music in silence, not melodies, but tones, vibrations, like the hum from that place had followed me. At night, I'd lay in bed staring at the ceiling, trying to hold on to that sound before sleep pulled it away. I began to write. Not full sentences, just words. Bits of what I saw. Light, hooks, garden, sky without floor. I didn't know what I was doing. It just felt like something I had to do, like I was preserving a memory that didn't want to stay still. I was terrified I'd forget, that the world would grind it out of me. When I was finally discharged, I stepped out of the hospital and felt like a stranger in my own life. The sun felt too bright, the air too loud. People talked about news, sports, politics, but it all seemed so far away, like their voices were muffled behind glass. I smiled, nodded, but I wasn't really there. Back at home, everything looked the same. But it didn't feel the same. My tools were still in the shed, my boots still by the door. But I felt like a visitor in my own story. I sat in the backyard one afternoon, watching the wind move through the trees, and for a moment I almost saw them shimmer, like back in that garden. I blinked, and it was gone. That night, I dreamt of the path again. The square stones floating in the sky, leading to that arched doorway. But this time the door was open. I didn't see anyone inside, just light, pure, steady light. And I felt myself reaching for it, stretching, not with hands, but with memory. I woke up with tears on my face. I started talking to people, not about what happened, but about life, about why we're really here. Some folks got uncomfortable, others leaned in. A few cried. I realized then that the story wasn't just mine. It had to be shared, not because I wanted attention, but because it was given to me, a responsibility, not a reward. I visited churches, community centers, even truck stops, told my story to anyone who'd listen. Some believed me, others didn't. That was okay. I wasn't trying to convince anyone. I was just planting seeds. And every time I spoke it out loud, the memory came alive again, sharper, closer. Like the more I gave it away, the more it stayed with me. Eventually, I met others, people who'd seen something too, different stories, same light. We talked for hours, comparing notes like survivors of a place most don't believe exists. We weren't crazy. We weren't lying. We were marked, changed. And once you've been touched by that place, nothing on earth feels quite the same again. I began to live differently, slower, gentler. I started noticing people more, the way a cashier's eyes flickered when they were tired, the way someone's voice cracked when they tried to be strong. I reached out more, said thank you more, not because I had to, but because I saw them, truly saw them. And the anger I used to carry, the impatience, the weight of grudges and regrets, they started to melt. I couldn't hold on to them, even when I tried. That place had burned them out of me, left only light behind. I wasn't perfect, not even close, but I was softer. And that softness was strength. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the sky for minutes, just breathing, listening, not for anything specific, just listening for the silence beneath the noise. That stillness, it wasn't empty, it was full of memory, of presence. Like the hum of that other world had followed me home and now hid between raindrops and wind gusts. My relationships changed. I didn't have time for shallow things anymore. If someone asked how I was, I told them the truth. If I loved someone, I said it. I didn't care if it was awkward. Life was too short, too sacred to waste time pretending. I forgave people who never asked to be forgiven. Let go of things I'd carried for years. That included my own mistakes. I stopped beating myself up for the things I couldn't change. I'd seen something that made all of it, the failures, the fights, the regrets, feel small, not meaningless, but part of the journey. Even the worst parts had a place. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was lost. That brought me peace I never thought I'd know. One afternoon, I sat down with my dad, just the two of us. We hadn't talked like that in years. He poured his coffee, black as oil, and looked at me with those tired eyes. I said, I almost didn't make it back. He nodded, didn't ask what I meant, just sipped and said, I know. Then he told me something I never expected, that he'd seen something too once, in Vietnam. Never spoke of it before. Said it came to him when he thought he was dying. He described a field, a song he couldn't place, a warmth that wasn't from the sun. We sat in silence for a while, two men who never hugged, just knowing. That moment healed something between us, not through explanation, but through shared mystery. I realized then how many people carry quiet miracles inside them, too afraid or unsure to speak them aloud. We think we're alone, but we're not. The veil between this world and the next is thinner than we let ourselves believe. As months passed, I went back to work, but I wasn't the same man on that bulldozer. I moved slower, more intentionally. I talked more with the crew, asked how they were really doing. I wasn't just chasing hours or paychecks anymore. I was building something with meaning, something that might outlast me. I started volunteering too, at shelters, recovery centers, even hospices, places where pain hangs in the air. But I didn't feel weighed down. I felt called. I'd been to the edge, and I'd come back with a lantern, not to preach, just to sit, to hold hands, to remind people they weren't forgotten. That light was still there. People began reaching out to me, friends of friends, strangers online. I heard you had an experience, they'd say. And I'd listen. Sometimes they hadn't told anyone what they'd been through. They were afraid. I understood. This world isn't always kind to stories that don't fit the mold. But the moment they shared, I saw the same glimmer in their eyes that I'd seen in mine. It gave me hope. Maybe the world was changing. Maybe more of us were waking up to something deeper, something ancient and holy, hiding in plain sight. We didn't need cathedrals to touch it. Just presence, just love, just truth. Every life mattered. Every moment was sacred. And we were all part of the same song. Sometimes, late at night, I'd still miss that other place, that garden, that hum, that feeling of being held by something endless. But I didn't ache the way I used to, because now I understood. That place isn't gone. It's just waiting. And in the meantime, I had a job to do. Be the proof that it's real. I started keeping a journal, not for anyone else, just for me. Pages filled with thoughts, dreams, fragments of memory. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and write down a word, just one, like peace, or fire, or clarity. They didn't always make sense, but they felt true, like pieces of that world reaching out. Every so often I'd get flashes, visions maybe, not like before, quieter, a glimpse of the path, a whisper of the trees with hooks. I'd be standing in line at the grocery store, and for a second I'd feel the light again, just for a moment, enough to remind me it wasn't a dream. It never was. I learned not to chase it. That only made it fade faster. Instead, I welcomed it, like an old friend dropping by unexpectedly. And the more I stayed open to it, the more often it came, in stillness, in laughter, in kindness. That world and this one, they weren't separate anymore. They overlapped, like tides coming in. One evening, I sat outside with my boots off, feet in the dirt. The sky turned orange and pink, and I felt a peace so deep I almost cried. Not because I was sad, but because I wasn't. For once, I didn't want to be anywhere else, not even in that place beyond. I was finally okay with being here, and that's when I knew I hadn't just come back from something. I'd come back for something, to remind people, to live differently, to tell the truth, even when it was hard, to walk slower, love louder, forgive quicker. I wasn't special, I was just awake now. And with that awareness came a quiet kind of responsibility. So I kept telling my story, at churches, schools, online forums, to cab drivers and strangers on planes. Sometimes people cried, sometimes they rolled their eyes, but once in a while, someone would go still. Their breathing would slow, their eyes would widen, and I'd know they'd seen it too, or at least felt it. One woman hugged me after a talk and said, "I lost my son, and for the first time in 5 years, I feel like he's okay." That's why I keep going. Not for applause, not for attention, but because someone out there is drowning, and this story might be their lifeline. The light I touched wasn't mine to keep, it was mine to carry. I don't fear death anymore, not even a little. I know it's just a return, a homecoming, not an ending, and knowing that has made me more alive than I ever was before. I don't need to have all the answers. I just need to stay open, keep loving, keep telling the truth. That's enough. People ask me all the time, what was the most important part of what you saw? And I always give the same answer, the love. Not the flowers, not the stars, not the path or the figure or even the light itself. It was the love, infinite, wordless, pure. That's the whole secret. That's the whole point. So now, when I walk through this world, I try to be that love. I fail, sure. I stumble, I get frustrated, but then I remember the hum, the hooks, the light that knew me and still welcomed me, and I breathe, and I begin again, and again, and again.